Thank you for joining us on this wonderful episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel the Law Olawale. Today, I have with me my guest is the City Attorney of Reynoldsburg. His name is Chris Shook. Chris has served in different capacities as an attorney in private practice, as a staff attorney for a judge, as a city lawyer, and as someone who writes ordinances for the city government. Today we'll be talking about a very present issue, human trafficking. Chris will be talking about this human trafficking issue because it's something that he has dealt with in his line of practice. Human trafficking is also known as is a trafficking in person. It's a form of slavery. It's a situation where people got stolen or kidnapped to be used for financial gain. But I'll be leaving most of the discussion and most of the explanation to Chris. But before we delve into the issue, I would like you to know more about Chris himself. Can you please tell us more about yourself and welcome to the show?
Yes, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Um, like you, I'm a lawyer and been grateful to have my law license now for 16 years. Um, I've practiced in a variety of areas. I started out in a law firm out in Newark, Ohio, and um, very grateful for my experiences there, where I practiced in a lot of different areas and had great partnerships with attorneys in that area. Uh, while I was there, I served as an acting judge in the municipal court and occasionally would serve as special prosecutor for the city of Newark when they would have conflict cases. Um, as you mentioned, I was a staff attorney for a judge in Franklin County, Judge Chris Brown, who is a good friend of mine and a passionate, fair-minded judge. I also worked in City Attorney Zach Klein's office in Columbus for a time period, and now I've been in this position as the city attorney in Reynoldsburg for the past 2 years. Uh, it's been quite a journey, but I'm truly grateful that in my career I've been able to work and touch so many different areas of law that I think have a tremendous impact on the lives of ordinary, everyday people.
Thank you. And I believe you grew up in Ohio.
I did. I did. I was actually born in Virginia and moved to Ohio when I was 2 years old. Eventually came to the Central Ohio area when I was 8. My whole family's from Central Ohio. My grandparents actually went to Central High School, which is now COSI. And they still live in the Hilltop area of Columbus. Um, my parents live in Pataskala, and my family and I live right next to them in Reynoldsburg, just an hour away. So we are Ohio people. We love this state. We love the weather. I am not going to be one of those people who complains about the weather.
Thank you. And what was your family life like growing up here in Reynoldsburg in Pataskala?
It was good. At the time, it was, the area was not quite as large as it is now. I went to Licking Heights High School. It was a much, much smaller school back then. My graduating class had 82 people. So everybody knew everybody. There was plenty of opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities because there were so few of us. So they needed to fill out the sports team somehow. And so, I was able to participate in a lot of different things. And I thought I had a pretty excellent upbringing.
Thank you. And you went to college at the Ohio State University where you studied journalism and political science. Why journalism?
Uh, you know, Growing up, there were two professions that I was most interested in. One was being an attorney. The other was being a sports journalist. I love sports. So I grew up watching ESPN as it was becoming its big sports media conglomerate. And, I thought, that's something I'd like to do. So when I went to Ohio State, I majored in journalism and I wrote for the Ohio State student newspaper. I covered some of the athletic teams at Ohio State, but ultimately decided I was going to go to law school. Um, primarily because I was looking at the landscape of journalism at the time, and it was changing dramatically. And so it was going to be a difficult profession to really get comfortable in. And so I felt like I needed to make a different decision.
Oh, great. Did anyone ever tell you that you have a voice of a broadcast journalist?
No, no one ever told me that at all.
Yes, yes, you have a radio and TV voice and face too.
Thank you.
You will have made a great journalist, reporting or even writing. So, while you were in law school, you tried your first jury trial.
Mhm.
Most people don't get to try cases. Even there are many lawyers who will never ever get to try cases, especially jury trials. But this is something that you did even while in law school. What was all that about?
Yeah, so I went to law school in Akron, Ohio. And while I was there, I took an unpaid internship in the city of Canton law director's office. At the time, and I think still currently, the Ohio Supreme Court would allow you as a third-year law student to obtain your internship certificate, which would allow you to appear in court as long as you had a supervising attorney with you. And so while I was in the Canton Law Director's office, we were able to try numerous kinds of cases that were traffic offenses, bench trials, and things of that nature. But I remember one day, and the city prosecutor came into the intern's office and asked me if I'd be willing to take on a drunk driving jury trial that was going to take place the next day. He gave me the video, he gave me the police report, and he said, "Be ready in the morning." And I was excited. I didn't really know what I was getting into. So I took that video, I took that police report, and I put a ton of preparation time in that night, and came in and was able to try my first case. And then I got another case. So it was a great experience. Great experience.
Oh, that was awesome. I can't imagine just throwing you into the throes of fire a day before the trial. You didn't even have enough time to prepare.
No, but I think that was part of the teaching process there. It was, sometimes you have to do things on the fly as an attorney. And so you don't always get the amount of preparation time that you want. It also helped that it was a pretty slam dunk conviction. There was a urine test and over the legal limit and all that. So I was scared to lose the case because it was a slam dunk.
Yeah, you make it sound as if it was so easy because you never know with jury trial. I remember my first experience too, similar to yours, but at least they gave me the weekend to prepare for it.
Well, I wasn't going to turn down the opportunity. I wasn't going to say, oh no, you only gave me one night to prepare. They were giving me a jury trial. I was taking it.
Yeah, and as the city attorney of Reynoldsburg, you've had to deal with human trafficking in the line of practice. You had to shut down an hotel on Bryce Road in your city because of suspicion of human trafficking. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that?
Well, there's a lot that goes into it. I guess the first thing I would mention is that, Reynoldsburg is the second largest suburb in Columbus. We have areas of our town that are, newer subdivisions that are, have no reputation for criminal activity. Great places to raise a family in an affordable area with good schools. But we also share the Bryce-Livingston corridor with the city of Columbus. So they have the west side of Bryce Road and we have the east side of Bryce Road. It's been explained to us by people with the state that the Bryce-Livingston corridor is one of the worst corridors in the state of Ohio for human trafficking. And there's a good reason for that. It is more of a rundown corridor. It had its heyday probably about 20, 30 years ago. You have about 3 or 4 hotels on the Columbus side of Bryce Road. You have the Days Inn on the Reynoldsburg side of Bryce Road, and they are right off Interstate 70. So you have hotels that are desperate for customers. You have easy access and convenience for individuals who are engaged in illicit activity and want to be able to have some of the privacy that a hotel can provide them. And so it's kind of a perfect storm in that corridor that what you see is people being trafficked in and out of these hotels. And you have hotel ownership that, more than happy to take payment and not ask any questions. So it becomes, a situation where the city of Columbus has got to be aggressive with the hotels on their side, and we felt that it was important for us to be aggressive with the hotel on our side. Um, so we took a year's worth of police reports, poured over them, went through them with our chief of police. We saw what was happening. There were certain cases where this is a human trafficking case, but because you can't get victim cooperation, it's a little bit more difficult to prove in court. So we had to piece this case together on a lot of common sense and inferences and present it to Judge Mingo in Franklin County. And she was convinced that this was a hotbed for criminal activity and it needed to be shut down temporarily.
How long was the investigation?
So the Days Inn had a bit of a history. It in 2018, it actually caught on fire and suffered a significant amount of structural damage. It was out of commission for probably a little over 2 years and then reopened in October of 2020. It had a reputation before then. So when it reopened in October 2020, our police department was keeping a close eye on it. We were keeping a close eye on it. When we started to see some problems arise, we met with ownership and explained to them our concerns. We made recommendations to them of security measures that they could take to mitigate criminal activity on their premises. Continue to monitor each and every police run that occurred to the hotel over the course of the next 9 months. And it just wasn't getting any better. In fact, it was getting worse. They weren't following our recommendations. And then we just felt like we had no choice. I mean, I think in a lot of times with, shutdowns, especially hotel shutdowns, you usually would wait like 2 years because you really want to get your case fully developed. You want certain criminal cases to progress to conviction. We didn't want to wait that long. We knew it was a problem, and we felt we had enough when we went to the court to get it shut down.
Oh, great. Were you able to rescue some victims during the operation, or you were just able to shut the hotel down?
So this gets difficult when it comes to trying to get victims out of that life. It's an incredible misunderstanding that the public has sometimes when they think about prostitution. I think the general sense is that these are consenting adults. That is not the case. Not generally. A lot of the women who are involved in prostitution activities are there for purposes of raising money to support a drug habit. They are there because they have been forced in there by a person who is probably supposed to be in more of a parental position to that person. They come from broken homes and they look for people to help them. And the people who reach their hand out to help them want to use them. And so, when we come across these individuals, the court system, we in Reynoldsburg, I know Franklin County does the best that they can to reach their hand out to these victims, to help them, to offer them services for housing, employment, mental health treatment, drug treatment. It doesn't always take. It doesn't. And sometimes the victims get intimidated even into not cooperating. So it is hard because, you dedicate so much of what you do to trying to help these people, to help save them. But we can't do more for them than they can do for themselves. And so, we end up having a lot of what we call losses. People who we've tried to help who we just couldn't.
Could it be that they don't want to cooperate because of the threat to their life if they did? Because sometimes they are being trafficked by a gang of people. So even if they gave away one person, there may still be the rest of the gang that may retaliate.
I would be guessing. I'm sure each situation is different. I think a lot of victims of human trafficking have financial dependence on their trafficker. Many of them are not from this country and would not know what to do with themselves if they were not being trafficked. They would not have a lifeline. And so all we can do is try to provide them that lifeline and hope they take it.
And how common is human trafficking in Ohio?
I think there's probably human trafficking just about everywhere in this world. In Ohio, and Ohio's no different. You're going to see them in your typical places right off interstate freeways. We've got major interstates that run through our state, 75, 71, and of course Interstate 70. Especially hotels that are right off the interstate. They're just a hotbed. They are the ideal location for human traffickers to operate out of those facilities and then jump from one facility to another.
Yeah, and you're definitely right with that because according to the Human Trafficking Institute, Ohio is one of the top 5 for human trafficking, and that's because of the proximity to Canada and also because of the networks of the roads. Because Ohio connects to a whole lot of places. And for people listening to this or watching this, sometimes they don't even know what to look out for if they see someone who's being trafficked. So what should people look out for to identify if someone has been trafficked or to identify human trafficking?
Well, yeah, it's not as if, a human trafficker is going to hold up a sign. This is what we've talked about with the hotel. How can you prevent human trafficking at your hotel? Well, there are always going to be signs that should be obvious to hotel management. You see multiple men going in and out of a hotel room during different hours of the day. We see human trafficking going on in the middle of the day. Our chief of police saw a person being trafficked drop keys outside of their window at the hotel while the chief was getting lunch. So this is happening all day. So that's the first thing to look for, especially if we're talking about hotel management, is that you will see the foot traffic. The other thing to look out for is that you're probably going to see a significant difference in ages between the person being trafficked and the person trafficking them, especially if we're talking about a minor who's being trafficked, which does happen. And so it's incumbent upon, at least from our perspective, that the hotel obtain as much information as they can from people who check into their hotel where they have those age disparities, because she's probably not his daughter. And you need to ask those questions to make that determination. And if she's not, then you need to report that immediately to the police. It's difficult to really give instructions to the general public about what to look out for because, the public, if they're thinking about human trafficking, they might see, just a normal, proper thing at the store or on the street and think it's human trafficking just because they heard something about what they're supposed to look for, and they might report something that's really not occurring. So it's difficult to kind of give the general public that advice because then you run the risk of the public engaging in a lot of phone calls of reporting what's otherwise legal activity. And we all know that when that happens, you run the risk mostly of that negatively impacting the African-American community.
Yeah, and someone can get hurt.
Yep.
Yeah. And also, is there a correlation between human trafficking and abduction and kidnapping?
I'm sure there is. I don't know that that's something that we've necessarily seen here. The kinds of relationships that I think you will see between a human trafficker and someone being trafficked, again, I think going back to the dependence issue, you'll have someone who is acting like a father figure to a victim, providing them financial assistance, a roof over their head, food, money for drugs to support a drug habit. And then they will take advantage of that financial dependence to get them to do things for them to help them make money. I think that's probably the most common relationship you will see between a human trafficker and someone being trafficked.
So they make them to be so dependable on them that they wouldn't be able to refuse whatever they ask them to do just to get finance or drugs.
Yes, I mean they'd be afraid to leave that relationship. They wouldn't know, what to do with themselves because they'd be concerned that, again, drug dependence is a big part of this. You meet someone who's an addict and someone who used to be an addict who's sober, and you can see a stark difference in the way that they talk and conduct themselves. Just more clear-minded, when you're talking to someone who's a recovered addict than you are someone who is an active addict. They're just not thinking straight. They're thinking about their next fix.
And who is more susceptible to being trafficked?
Young women, especially young women who come from broken homes, um, for out of foster care. They who don't have that lifeline from family that they can rely upon. It's for traffickers. It's they are able to keep them in that relationship because they have nowhere else to go, and they have nowhere else to go because they just don't have those family connections.
Mhm. So they are the perfect victim because they have no one else that may be looking for them. And so
Mhm.
the trafficker becomes the sole source of lifeline that they have.
Yes, yes.
And who are normally the traffickers? Is they like a one person? Is it like a gang? How can law enforcement determine who the traffickers are?
That's probably outside my area of expertise. I'm sure the FBI, the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation, um, have a lot more experience with that. Um, when they conduct their investigations, they are usually able to, and we saw this with one particular investigation, they can identify who the victim is first before they can identify the trafficker in the structure of trafficking. So they really have to be able to make contact um, with the victim and get that information from them, um, because that's going to be the best source of investigatory material that they have.
Thank you. Is there a connection between social media and human trafficking?
Yes. Um, what we have seen, and we've conducted a few stings um, at the Days Inn. We've conducted stings at other hotels, or just easier places to conduct a sting like that. And they use various social media sites where they are able to connect with prospective Johns or prostitutes, um, because a lot of the commerce in that area is going on some of these illicit websites.
So with social media, is there any kind of warning that one can give to young women or young girls about social media and what to look out for, who to look out for, and who to avoid?
I think the most important thing is to not accept. Let's say we're talking about Facebook, and unfortunately, I'm not the most technologically advanced 41-year-old. I don't have Instagram. I don't have a Twitter page. I do have a Facebook page. Uh, my suggestion would be do not accept friend requests from people you do not know. And parents, I would not have my kids on social media until they are at least 16. And this isn't just a human trafficking thing. This is a bullying thing. It's a maturity thing. Social media it's in my opinion, it's a very, very dangerous area for young people to be involved with.
Thank you. I understand you explained earlier that most traffickers use the victim dependence
Mhm.
on them because they provide them either with drugs or with money. Then is there a correlation between human trafficking itself and drug trafficking?
Oh yeah, yes. Usually, traffickers, they're going to diversify their source of income. I mean, that it's not as if they are above breaking the law. Um, so they will have access to drugs from a variety of sources. They could be the source themselves. Um, and so those two worlds collide, significantly.
Yeah, and I understand in the city of Reynoldsburg, you're able to shut down that hotel on Bryce Road. Are there steps being taken now to avoid a resurgence or a recurrence of the same situation at other places in the city?
Well, that was the only location that we had a problem with in Reynoldsburg. Um, we've been We're a lot smaller than Columbus, so clearly we're more fortunate than Columbus. But even on that same corridor, we only have one hotel. And so we were able to devote a lot of attention, time, and resources to that hotel. With that hotel, we went through litigation with them, and they were shut down about 5 months. We reached an agreement with the approval of Judge Mingo to allow them to reopen with very strict conditions that they have to follow in order to mitigate the risk of that kind of activity continuing on the premises. We can't be a guarantor of that. They can't even be a guarantor of that. But there are certain things that they weren't doing before because we think they were willfully looking the other way that they have to do now that will make it very, very difficult for a trafficker to be successful at that specific hotel. That includes prohibiting them from taking in any cash as part of a transaction. Drug traffickers, human traffickers, they don't typically take credit card from their customers. They deal in cash. It's a cash business. So we don't want the hotel accepting any of that, any cash as payment. Locals, people who live within 15 miles of the hotel are disproportionately more likely to commit criminal activity there. So we put in strict regulations about, when and how they could allow locals to stay at the hotel. More security in the doors that go in and out of the hotel that are not the front door. Parking passes for any and all guests and visitors, sign-in sheets, the requirement to provide identification. Even if you're just visiting someone there, you have to check in at the front desk and provide identity. So we go back to that same thing that they need to be looking for. Men going in and out of a particular hotel room, you couldn't miss it if they have to sign in at the front desk. You would know. You know what hotel room they're checking into. And there's two men unrelated checking into the same hotel where a young woman is staying. That should be just a huge red flag of what is going on in that room.
Thank you. So, in essence, you need the cooperation of the hotel staff to stop this trafficking.
Yes, it's their premises. This is nuisance activity occurring on their property. They have an obligation. They want to make money, and I get that. But at the end of the day, in this corridor, if they can't turn a profit running a business that is turning away criminals, then maybe a hotel just shouldn't be in that corridor. Maybe it just can't be successful in that corridor, and we're going to find out because we're not going to allow them to continue to cater to criminal activity.
Exactly. And before you became the city top attorney in Reynoldsburg, you also served as a special prosecutor for the city of Newark.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Well, it was infrequent. Obviously, if someone's employed by a particular city and they get charged with a crime, the city law director's office can't handle that case because of their close relationships. Fortunately, I haven't had that problem yet in this position where we've had to prosecute a city employee and I had to hire someone to do the prosecution. But when I was practicing out in New York, that happened a couple of times. There were situations where either a close relative of a city employee would pick up an OVI, or we had a situation where an officer was arrested for domestic violence, and another situation where an officer obtained a DUI, and that office, they reached out to me in the private practice and asked me if I'd be willing to go ahead and take on those cases. And I truly believe that it doesn't matter who you are, the law will apply equally to everybody. So I tried to treat each one of those cases and those defendants as if they were just anybody else.
You also served as acting judge in Licking County.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Licking County Municipal Court.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us when this was and what kind of cases did you handle?
Well, as Licking County Municipal Court, they handle misdemeanor cases, traffic, assault, domestic violence, small financial lawsuits, things of that nature. It's a high volume court just because of the number of misdemeanor offenses that get committed and brought in. About my sixth year in the practice of law, I was then eligible to serve as a judge. And I remember Judge Stansberry in Licking County called me up and asked me if I'd be willing to come fill in for him because he was going to be out of town on a particular day. And then the other judge out there, Judge Higgins, started calling me up and asking me if I could fill in if he was going to be out of town or if one of them was sick or had something come up. It was cool. I'll admit, the first time I was able to put on a robe 10 years ago it was cool. It was nice to be in that position and to be trusted by those judges with that immense responsibility.
Yeah. And you've been a staff attorney for a judge for over 4 years. So, and staff attorneys, for those who don't know who they are like the judge without the robes. So, do you have any ambition of running for judge?
I think that's a position that would be very exciting. There are some practical realities that probably would prevent me from ever being a judge. Number one, I live in Licking County. I identify as a Democrat and have so my entire life. I believe strongly in the principles of the Democratic Party, at least as compared to the Republican Party. But my county is a very heavily Republican county. So the odds of a Democrat winning countywide are very, very small. I have no intention of moving to Franklin County, which we all know is a much friendlier county for Democrats. I love my home. My wife and I bought it more than 10 years ago. We aren't planning to move anywhere. So the practical reality is that while it would be a job that I would be honored to have, it's probably not in the cards for me.
Thank you. And you also worked as a volunteer attorney for the Interfaith Legal Clinic.
Mm-hmm.
What did that entail?
Well, it was so out in Licking County, once a month, they would hold a free legal clinic at one church in the county. And that had been something that had been going on a long time. When I was a first year attorney, I got a call from, a friend of mine who's just been one of my mentors in the profession. Her name is Ellen Atui Walters. She's now an assistant city attorney in Columbus. And at that time, she was coordinating being able to get attorneys in to volunteer to serve at the clinic. And she called me up and asked me if I would come. And I'm a yes person. So I said yes. And then she called me up the next month and I said yes. And I think I just went back and did it every single month for probably about 5 or 6 years. It was fulfilling. A lot of times in the legal profession, especially on the private side, you worry about making money, paying your student loans, paying your mortgage, taking care of your kids. Money is important. But when I would do the legal clinics, I wasn't even thinking about money. We sit down with people who are vulnerable, have very little financial means, who are trying to navigate a system that is complicated, even for lawyers at times. And to be able to provide assistance to them, they probably gave me more than I ever gave to them because I always walked away feeling a little bit better about what I did for a living, being able to help them out at the legal clinic. So they still do the legal clinic. I actually volunteer at a different legal clinic now, one that's in Reynoldsburg every single month at the Vineyard Church in Reynoldsburg. It's just more closely located to me. And so it still gives me the opportunity to be able to help people out every month.
And you also help people, you created a recovery program for the mayor's court. What is that about?
Yeah. Well, I think, anybody who's worked in the criminal justice system, not just in Ohio, but anywhere in this country over the last 15, 20 years, forever, right? I mean, we have seen how our system has responded to drug addiction. And quite frankly, we have continued to kind of run around in circles trying to figure out the best way to help people. Because I'll tell you this, locking up an addict doesn't get them clean. They might be clean for the time period that they're in jail or in prison. And I say might because they'll still have some access to drugs in there. And if you really want to take a person who is involved in a life of addiction, probably some level of crime, especially theft, to support their habit, and you want to pull them out of that life and take a bite out of crime in your area, you need that person to work to get sober. and you need to be able to provide them resources to get sober. So when these individuals come in through our mayor's court, they'll be charged with, a nonviolent offense, like a theft or even an OVI, and they'll have a history of drug abuse, drug addiction, drug-related convictions. And ordinarily, it might be the kind of case where you'd say, well, this has got to be a jail sentence considering their criminal record. But we would look at it as an opportunity to try and get them into a 24-month program that is designed to get them engaged in treatment, at least at the first part, and then start working towards them getting housing and employment, because those are critical factors to long-term sobriety, housing and employment. And then hopefully by the end of that 24 months, we've given them tools, resources, and help get them back on their feet in a way that sobriety can stick. And if it sticks, with that particular person, that's one less person committing crimes in your neighborhood. So it has a public safety aspect to it. But there's also that compassionate aspect of helping someone who's someone's son or brother or sister, daughter, get out of that life
before they end up dead.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to the high rate of opioid death.
Yeah.
Thank you. And apart from prosecuting cases, trying to help addicts and people who have been trafficked, shutting down hotels that are susceptible to being used by human traffickers, you also, in your line of work, you've helped to write ordinances for the city. One of them is the anti-discrimination law. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So the anti-discrimination law actually was an initiative that was brought forth by one of our council members, Councilmember Kristen Bryant, also an attorney and works in the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, to address a real need for legislation at the local level. In Ohio and in the United States, at least until recently, it was legal to discriminate against a member of the LGBTQ community in housing, in employment, and in public accommodations. It was legal to do that. And despite repeated efforts both at the State House and in Congress to change that, the changes weren't coming. So the local governments were taking the lead. And in Reynoldsburg, we wanted to be leaders. And we wanted to send a message to the State House that this is the kind of discrimination that, isn't going to be acceptable in Reynoldsburg, but should not be acceptable in the state of Ohio. You should not be denied housing or employment solely because of your sexual orientation or gender identity. And so that was one of the first things that our new council wanted to accomplish when they took office in 2020. To me, that's one of the best accomplishments that we've had in the city, at least as far as, what I've been able to be a part of to draft that legislation and get it in front of council, and have that become the law of the city of Reynoldsburg. And I'm very grateful that's a law we have not had to enforce, because, that means that our employers, our landlords, our services, they are doing the right thing. They are not discriminating, or at least not in a way that's been brought to our attention yet. So knock on wood that, the city of Reynoldsburg and our residents are all doing the right thing.
Yeah, I hope you will never get to enforce it. No. Yeah, you also help to draft the medical marijuana regulations. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so as you know, medical marijuana was legalized by the state a few years ago. And local governments, in response to the legalization of medical marijuana, put in some restrictions on where you could have medical marijuana processing in the city or medical marijuana dispensaries in the city, because you really didn't want to be overrun with it. So we, pouring through our zoning code and some of our city ordinances, we did not have those regulations in place. We were not prepared for the potential influx of medical marijuana dispensaries, processing, businesses of that nature. Not that we don't want them. I firmly believe in the legalization of marijuana in general, not just medical marijuana, but you don't want it to become your prime industry. You do want to restrict where those businesses can operate. You don't want them close to schools or parks. And so we did put some of those reasonable restrictions in. Again, not because we don't want the businesses here, but because we don't want that to be a predominant business here. We want to have diversity of business in the city of Reynoldsburg.
Thank you. Is there a correlation between medical marijuana establishment and crimes?
Not that I have seen. I tried to take a look at has happened in some of these states that have legalized marijuana. Our neighbor to the north, Michigan, has legal marijuana. My wife's from Michigan. And it appears as though those facilities have relatively nice appearance from the exterior. You couldn't tell what was going on just if you were walking down the street. They have high level of security. They recognize that they don't want to be the victims of theft or robbery. So they put in high levels of security. And that's the key. We really want that to be the kind of business, if it comes to our city, that doesn't dominate, maybe a strip where it's just like big marijuana leaves on the sign outside the business. And then other businesses don't want to be closely located to it. We want it to be kind of an incognito type of business. And I think our restrictions will accomplish that.
Thank you. And you also worked on the ordinance that deals with the offense of sexual exploitation. Do you want to tell us about that? Is there a correlation between that and human trafficking?
Well, what we wanted to do was, so we had a crime on the books called soliciting or loitering for prostitution. And that would apply to both prostitute and John. In my opinion, and in the opinion of our police department, specifically our Deputy Chief of Police, Rhonda Grizel, who brought this idea to our attention, was that we wanted to treat Johns differently than prostitutes. There's an imbalance in that relationship. I've met with a lot of Johns, and we've conducted sting with Johns, and they are convinced when they get into these situations that they're not doing anything wrong, that they are going to meet a consenting adult, and that all they're doing is engaging in the oldest profession in human history, right? And so they do not understand how those women got into that life, and they do not understand how they are a part of their continued exploitation. We wanted a criminal offense that accurately reflected the conduct of those typically men. And so we created the offense of sexual exploitation, and that applies to the customers involved in prostitution, the Johns. If you go to a hotel and you want to hire a prostitute and we catch you, we will charge you under Reynoldsburg Code with sexual exploitation. It's a first-degree misdemeanor. We treat it markedly different than we would treat a prostitute. Prostitute comes in on a sting. We're typically trying to engage them with help services. A John comes in. We are definitely going to treat them differently because we believe their involvement in this industry is very, very different.
Thank you. Do you also offer them any kind of diversion where maybe they have to attend class to be educated to know about human trafficking, and not, because it seems like they don't have the mens rea to know that they are taking advantage of these women?
We do, but it depends. One of the great things about Mayor's Court is that it typically gives us as prosecutors an opportunity to sit down with a person in a setting that is less adversarial, and get a sense of how they feel about what they did. If I'm talking to someone and they're in on a sexual exploitation charge and they're giving me attitude, or they show no remorse whatsoever for their conduct, the odds of them getting into a diversion program are pretty small. If someone comes in and they're incredibly remorseful and they're willing to go to John School, they're willing to do community service, they're willing to engage in research into the problems of human trafficking and prostitution and write a detailed research paper for us as part of their diversion, we'll allow them to do that as long as they have shown that remorse at the outset. I'm still surprised by anybody who comes into criminal court charged with a crime, especially one like that, who is incapable of demonstrating at least some level of remorse or fear for being in the situation that they're in. But it does happen.
Thank you. Yeah, tell us a bit about the vacant property registration ordinance.
Yeah. So this was in 2020. I want to give credit to Council Member Shawnette Strickland, who brought this initiative to the city. There is a correlation between vacant properties and crime. And, we wanted to be able to identify what were the vacant properties in the city. We wanted to register them so that we could pay closer attention from a code enforcement standpoint on what was going on in those properties. Make sure that if they're going to be vacant, at least they're up to code, at least they're secured and being monitored, in that there's a person we can contact if there's a problem at that property. So we put that ordinance into place, and then we had to take on the task of trying to identify, what were the vacant properties in the city and notifying the owners of their obligation to register. And it's been tremendous, because what we have seen from that is we have seen dozens of houses that were previously vacant get sold to people who would rehab the houses, maybe resell it and flip it, or someone who wanted to live there. But the most important thing is we were able to take a vacant building and turn it into something useful in the city, just by virtue of creating this ordinance and notifying them of their responsibilities under this vacant property registration process. And it's great, especially in the current real estate market. You could sell a house in Reynoldsburg for twice as much as you paid for it 10 years ago. So I don't know why anybody would want to sit on a vacant house in the city right now.
Yeah. What would have been the ramification if they decide not to register it and they leave the property vacant?
They can leave the property vacant as long as they register. If they don't register, then we charge them with an unclassified misdemeanor for failure to register. But really, we're not trying to convict anybody of anything. We're just trying to get them to register. It's just a process. It's just a tool that we use to promote compliance with the law.
The law. Yes. Do they have, can they suffer the risk of losing the property to the city if they still don't comply? And the property becomes a nuisance.
Yes, but that's a process. If a property becomes a nuisance, and we have to engage in self-help measures to clean up that property, which we will do if that property creates a health, safety, and sanitary issue. We will take the cost of cleanup. We will place it as a lien on that property. And we could seek to foreclose on that property. It doesn't mean that we're going to be the ones who buy it in a sheriff's sale. But it does mean that we want a responsible buyer who's going to deal with that property appropriately. That's what that's about. It's just about turning these properties into changing them from being eyesores or maybe even magnets of, criminal activity, and then turning them into houses for people. I mean, that's what we want.
Something productive. Thank you. And your office also offers internships to high schoolers who might be thinking of becoming an attorney. How can people apply for this?
Well, it's, from my perspective, when I was in high school, this is a long time ago, but we didn't have a lot of options for, college credits. We didn't have options for career internships. I mean, I worked at Kmart getting carts out of the parking lot. And I always wish that had been something that was available to me. We have a large school district here, and the students in our school district are going to have a variety of interests. And invariably, there's going to be somebody who's interested in having a career in law. I remember our very first intern, her name was Tapisha Casey Kotri, and she's now at the University of Virginia on a full ride scholarship. She helped to write our Civilian Review Board legislation as a high school senior. She's writing legislation for a city. We currently have a senior intern whose dad is a police officer, and she has an interest in being a prosecutor someday. She was referred to our office by her teacher. And she's come in and she's been helping us out with Mayor's Court and just learning a lot about how the criminal justice system operates, and in ways that you probably don't expect from just watching about it on TV. So this practical experience, we feel like, is a service that our office can provide to the community. We want to be good partners with our schools. We want our young people to succeed. And if you've got something like this, like a law office right in the middle of town where you can provide those opportunities, then we absolutely should. That is something that's a service that we should be providing in City Hall.
Yeah, it's a great program. But my question is, how can a student apply? Do you only accept them by referrals, or is there a form they can complete online, or can they send in a letter of interest?
They can send in a letter of interest. We get referrals from teachers. I remember Depisha was interested in being an intern here even before I had taken office. And she had been a student at Harvard in the summers while she was still in high school. So I knew she was highly intelligent and knew that she could bring a lot to this office, knew that the experience she could gain here would be very valuable to her going forward. So there's not an application process. We don't send out like a big solicitation to the schools. It comes to us a little bit more organically.
Okay, wow. Tell me a little bit more about the Civilian Review Board, because I know you mentioned it, that intern also helped to work on it, and that's also some of the things that you have achieved as a city attorney.
Yeah. So the concept of a Civilian Review Board, I think that gained a lot of popularity nationwide in the aftermath of George Floyd's death, but this was actually an initiative that our council wanted to pursue even before those more high-profile events, because we all know those are not isolated events. And so council wanted to have a process by which we could review allegations of discrimination against our police department. And we went and looked at what some other cities had done. There weren't many communities that were as small as Reynoldsburg that had a Civilian Review Board. Like Pittsburgh has one, and Cleveland, and Columbus just got one. And, but we wanted to have one that worked for us, our city, at our size. We also wanted to do it in a way that didn't seem confrontational to our police officers. We're not saying that you guys are doing anything wrong right now. And in fact, I'm very confident in our police department right now. But we wanted to have a process by which members of the public would at least be able to pursue their complaint to a citizen board. So we drafted up an ordinance, and we took that draft and we sent it to the Fraternal Order of Police. We tried to work with the FOP on it because, quite frankly, I don't think these things can be successful if you don't have police buy-in. If the police are skeptical of these boards, they will not accomplish their goals, which is really just to at the ground level, try to get police officers to be more race conscious, comply with use of force policies in a respectable way, and you won't get that if they feel like they're being attacked by city leadership. You just won't get it. So we worked hand in hand with the FOP. We met with them, went over some of their concerns, made some changes based on those concerns, and then eventually we were able to reach an ordinance that earned their full support. And it's an ordinance that arguably has even more power than the Columbus's Civilian Review Board. And just like our anti-discrimination ordinance, as of today, knock on wood, we have not had to have any complaints come before our Civilian Review Board. Our officers, our police department, the chief of police, deputy chief, they deserve a tremendous amount of credit for having a very professional police force that works hard to have great relationships in the community.
Yeah, that's quite impressive. Yeah, thank you very much for coming on to Legal Angle. Do you have any parting words for our audience?
I just thank you for being doing this. Thank you for inviting me to come on the show. I hope that I was able to give the appropriate people credit for things that they did that really helped to move our city forward. Because it really is a team effort here in Reynoldsburg, and so grateful to work with the people I get to work with. My office staff, they make me look way better than I deserve. So it's just been a wonderful experience so far, and I just hope to get to do it for much, much longer.
Yeah, so too, I wish you good luck as you continue in the city. You're doing a tremendous job. Just keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for those of you watching us or listening to us in the podcast, we thank you for tuning in. And if you want to report, if you suspect human trafficking and you want to report, there is a national human trafficking hotline you can call. The number is 1-888-3737-888. Again, 888-3737-888. And thanks again for joining us on this episode. Until next time, stay safe and stay blessed. Bye for now.
Thank you.